Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for January 23rd, 2017. We'll begin with a special order calendar. Decision items. Item number 1, 8054BZ, 150 East 39th Street, Manhattan.
Okay. We received a letter that indicates that they've agreed, the client or the owner has agreed to the condition that commercial use be limited to the hours of 6 a.m. and 9 p.m., which is what we discussed at the hearing. And to amend the certificate of occupancy, which it needed to have done but hadn't done, to reflect residential recreation room in the cellar for use by the subject building residents and also those of 108 East 38th Street, unless for some reason that's no longer the case, with respect to that latter. Anybody, any other comments?
Item number 2, 32005BZ, 113 4th Avenue, Manhattan.
As requested, they added notes to the plans about sprinklers and alarms. I don't think there are any other issues.
Item number 3.
Yes, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I think the other question was that if there is an ADA accessible route to the site, and I just want to confirm that the plan, while it indicates that there is one from Park Avenue, just want to make sure that it's directly from Park Avenue to...
No, this is the 4th Avenue project.
Oh, right.
This one didn't have an ADA issue.
Sorry,
we had two others where we weren't sure.
The next one.
You mean the next?
I mean the next one.
Yeah,
sorry. I'll hold my comment for the next one.
Item number 3, 7206BZ, 1 Park Avenue, Manhattan.
There we go. So they did provide revised plan showing the ADA access from the street.
I just want to make sure that it's directly from the main main entrance and not through another business operation on this.
I believe it was
It
through,
wasn't-
not through another business, it was through the
the-
lobby.
Okay.
It goes through the lobby, and I believe there are 2 elevators, unless I'm mixing this one up with another one, 2 elevators that are devoted to this use and that stop on this floor and then continue through the building. They, you know, obviously it's an elevator for the building. Are you on?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Next to the other set of elevator banks.
Yeah, it's a part of the main elevator bank, but they have sort of commandeered 2 for both this use and the rest of the building's use.
Okay, so everyone's good on that one?
Yes.
Okay. Continued hearing items. Item number 4, 112964BZ, 14736 Brookville Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, I thought the applicant was responsive to many of our concerns, including the installation of infill planting, the repair of fencing, which maybe looks like it was painted. I'm not sure how much was replaced. Reduction in the amount of signage. They actually show us the distance of the sign that was removed, and the painting kind of the upper portion of the building, and the curb cut sidewalk repair. However, I didn't see a photo showing the concrete curbs all around the planting beds that were shown on the approved drawings or even on the proposed drawings, or the bumpers at each parking space. There's also no photo showing a ramp installed for disabled access to the use group 6 retail space, or indications on the drawing that the ramp length complies with code. There's a drawing with a very short ramp, and I just don't see how that's long enough to meet code. And then I don't see a picture of the ramp, so I don't even know if it's there. Also, the fencing along the residential side needed to be opaque with slatting, and it isn't. And the drawing doesn't indicate any fencing installed along that perimeter, so I'm not sure what the situation there is. I also don't see the signage calculations on the drawings, although there's a signage zoning sheet that was provided that claims compliance. You actually have to show drawings of each sign, their dimensions, and how many square feet or square inches the sign is, and then you total it up and you show us that it doesn't exceed the C1 regulations, right? If that's right. And then The parking space indications have now been removed from the plans, whereas before they were on the plans. We saw the indications of each parking spot, even though I understand it's gravel and they can't stripe it. So on the prior set of drawings, on the approved set and on the set that was submitted just earlier, we saw clearly the location of 10 spaces. The applicant was also supposed to clear up the confusion over lot 33 and lot 30. The tax map shows we're talking about lot 30, but all of the approvals are for lot 33. So we need this cleared up. That's a critical element in this process and in what the OB expects to see. The applicant was also supposed to address the parking requirements for all uses on the lot, including the use group 6 retail area that is presently vacant and was previously storage. I'm not sure at all how the 7 required spaces were calculated that you see on the drawings. It seems like they, in fact, kind of backed into how many spaces you're allowed to fit on the lot based on how many square feet there are in the open space, and then decided that they wanted 10, but I don't know how they got to 7 being required in the first place. We need an analysis based on something, so I'm suggesting 1 space per 300 square feet of selling space, because we don't, this isn't in a, so we always talk about this being in a C1 district. Is it a C11 or a C12 or C13? Each of those has different parking requirements, so I'm suggesting 1 space per 300, which is as close as I could figure gotten us 7 spaces. It wasn't 1 per 400. Also, they need to provide photos of, and to clear up a lot of these questions, of all sides of the building and all perimeters of the site, and key them to the plans, because just the floating photographs, it's very hard to tell where things are. And I just have, because Commissioner Otley Brown isn't here today, I have her comment, which is that the use group 6 in the rear does not appear to be ADA accessible. Anybody else? Any other comments?
I think you covered just about everything. There was I know that there was a sign on the, I believe it was the west side of the building. They gave us a reduction in signage on Brookville Avenue, but on the west side there was a sign which they didn't clarify whether they had removed that. And also, in addition to the residential fencing, there was that area at the rear where the trash container was, which had pretty lousy fencing also.
Anybody else? All right. And also, we did talk about that any use group 6 use on the site, retail use, must be in parking category B or less. So, so that'll be a limitation on the approval. Okay.
Item number 5, 37471BZ, 20511 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
They requested an adjournment on this. I believe we also got a letter today, last night or something, from the Auburndale Association on this one.
Mr. Euler?
Yeah. So, yeah, I just got them in our, there were 3 letters that were sent. I believe one of them was about this.
And the other one was another one.
Requesting really that the applicant meet with the community board, and at the very least meet with the community association, because we don't really have any authority to send this back to the community board, but in the interest of being good neighbors and working out the difficulties, because the neighbors come here and voice opposition to the project, they really should talk to the community association and the community board about how to work out the issues. The letter was just submitted today, I believe, this morning, so the applicant should get a copy of it.
Okay. I think in the other case too.
Yeah, there were 3 cases where he submitted. Okay.
Item number 6, 115181BZ, 95 Van Dam Street, Manhattan.
Madam Chair, I'll be recusing.
Oh, okay. I believe the applicant was responsive to our concerns, and in particular, they demonstrated compliance with the conditions of the approval, except for the window wall attenuation. However, they did conduct a noise study on October 25th of last year, and the results were submitted to DEP for review, and DEP on November 30th sent a letter stating that they agreed based on the noise study that the existing window wall condition is acceptable, right? So I think we're good to go on this. Okay?
Anybody else? Item number 7, 71682BZ, 20930 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, they also requested an adjournment on this one, and we also received a letter from the Auburndale Association, Mr. Euler, requesting again that certain changes be made to the project and that there be a meeting with the community board and the association. And again, we can't mandate a community board meeting because that's not how our process works, but we can certainly, I really encourage the applicant to work with the community to try to resolve these open issues because they have an effect on how we review the case. So,
and just as a note, the issue was specifically that was raised was regarding the removal of the barbed wire. And that has been raised not only by the community but also by this board.
right. It's always
Right from the
required.
beginning.
Yes.
And we had never received a response to this. And I hope that the next hearing, this would get resolved because it's not a difficult issue.
Right,
to-
it more than resolved, it needs to be removed and we see photographs of it
Exactly.
removed. That's
Right.
how you resolve it, not promise us you'll do it and then never do it.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Item 8, number 8, 10993BZ, 18911 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, this one says, we have an updated letter from the community board indicating that they now find the layout of the restaurant improved, but continue to have concerns about traffic and parking. I believe we also have a letter, a recent letter from Mr. Euler on this one. Again, expressing concerns about the project. But obviously, the applicant did reach out to the community board on this one. That's why we have a recent letter. We also have a letter from State Senator Avella opposing the application, citing traffic concerns. He apparently was not aware of the community board's revised position because he makes reference to their opposition, although it's true that the community board hasn't modified their formal recommendation. That was, I think that was a letter from the chair, not from the board, not a new board vote. Also, Mr. Euler explained the last time that the community board voted to deny largely because they lacked information. So maybe the softening of the community board is now they know more about the project. They have drawings. The drawings are very detailed. The hours of operation suggested are daily from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m., which previously was approved from 7 a.m. to 12 a.m. I actually don't understand how that's compatible with the residential use above at all, even 12 a.m. 7 days a week. I just don't know how anyone can live in such a situation. The applicant provided a number of examples of other commercial or sort of restaurant uses in the immediate area and that showed different kinds of opening hours. And it seemed to me that the Boston Market's hours were the most compatible with the adjacent use, which is 10:30 a.m. to 10:30 p.m., though I understand this use is a breakfast use. But, you know, you're living in a place and it's a small building. I'm not sure that 7 a.m. is really, especially 7 days a week. So I think we should talk about that. The entry stair to the residential units, which used to be located right in the center of the building, is shown on the plans to be relocated so as to free up the area in the restaurant and keep the tenants just a little bit more out of the fray. However, they still share the porch entrance with the restaurant, so everyone has to go up to the same porch level, and then restaurant goers go straight and the tenants go right. And the handicap ramp to the restaurant which is really the restaurant access, therefore, and since it's a ramp, I would think the kitchen would use it and other things would use it to bring in equipment that's passing through in front of the tenant's front door. So I still think that the location of the tenant's entrance needs work. Since they're willing to move a staircase, it's major construction in the building. And then the restaurant's dumpster is still located just below the residential window at the rear. None of this is a good situation for a residential tenant unless they're also the restaurant owner. I think the design needs more refinement and a better place for the trash, which must be in a permanent enclosure and really should be kept inside until pickup. I noticed that there's the ramp, because it's going up quite a height, has an underneath area that seems to me could be used for a trash enclosure. Also, there's this garage on the site. You know, maybe that's a possibility. I don't understand how that's used. They're keeping the driveway open with access to the garage. So I'd like to know how that's used. Also, the photo showed the perimeter fencing in really terrible shape and no landscaping provided at all at the perimeter. This needs to be shown. The fence needs to be replaced. We should get updated photos if there have been improvements since the last set of photos were taken last June. This is something Mr. Euler referred to also. The apartment layouts, you know, nothing like drawings telling you a lot of things, right? The apartment layouts show 5-bedroom, 2-bath units with a small living room and kitchen on the second floor, and 4-bedroom, 2-bath units on the third floor. That reads to me like a dormitory. I'd like to know how these units are intended to be used. What is the building code occupancy group and the multiple dwelling law designation? They also should provide a roof plan and clarify about the doors that open into the air on the third floor. I think there's something wrong with the drawings that are showing what's below you is dashed. What's dashed is what's above you in the section, right? Because the doors literally open and then you fall to your death. That's the way the drawings look. The parking survey needs to be accompanied by a map that shows what the parking regulations are on each street surveyed and how many spaces potentially are able to be located on each street. I also note that the survey was done during Christmas week. So that can't be representative of the full parking demand. Demand also has to be studied for peak hours of the night shift at the restaurant. And contrary to the statement in the cover letter, the plans do not indicate planting. We asked that a landscaping plan be provided showing number and types of shrubs and trees. We asked for that already and we didn't get that. And we really need the architect at this hearing because asking the attorney to guess what a lot of the answers are is not helpful. I again have Commissioner Otley Brown's comments that I'll read. With respect to an operational plan, she finds it unclear whether or not there will be outdoor seating. The beginning of the hearing response letter says the plans will show outdoor seating, and a few paragraphs down it says there won't be any outdoor seating, but the plans show outdoor seating in the front yard. She's concerned about the hours. If there is outdoor seating, 2 a.m. seems late for outdoor activity, perhaps 11 p.m. is a limit. With respect to the parking survey, again, the boundaries of the radius of the study are not clear. It just says vicinity of. It isn't clear where the legal spaces are located because there isn't a map. It isn't clear what sides of the street the spaces are located on. And it just says December 2016 at the top with 4 columns with 1 time period per day, which is not how a study needs to be done. We need the exact date. Well, I know it's the 19th, so I did see a date. But it needs to indicate all the times that were studied. Any other comments? I know those are well.
Well, I had thought that they were going to provide us with a detailed landscaping plan that would also include, you know, pathways and how the tenants are separated from the commercial use, as well as show how the garbage is removed without becoming a nuisance to the tenants. And I was sort of dismayed not to see that, because I think we've been asking that for a while. Yet include details on the fencing and what was happening at the rear and how they were going to landscape the rear so that there was, some sort of really nice buffer. I also had questions about the seating in the front, and whether or not they were actually they were proposing to have seating outside in the front yard, and if they are proposing that, then they need to show us how they're going to mitigate any nuisance that might create, such as if there's lighting out there in the evenings, are they anticipating some sort of music, or, so how would they handle that? And if they're not going to have outdoor seating, then we need to remove that from the drawings. I too questioned how the tenants enter in conjunction with this, with the patrons, and that there might be, confusion at the front there, because people come home with packages and things like that, and then you've got also people trying to get into a restaurant. It could be quite confusing. Yes, definitely provide a map for the parking survey. That would be very, very helpful. And I had a lot of questions about their hours of operation. I understand opening for breakfast, which might be even nice for the tenants because they can come down and have breakfast, but 7 a.m. might be a little too early, as it's not as if you open at 7 a.m. and you're ready to go. You open at 5:30 a.m. so that you can open your door at 7 a.m. So maybe it's, at 8 o'clock or 8:30 if they want to provide breakfast. But definitely, I think they need to close. 10 p.m. I think is probably pretty reasonable. And I was not convinced by their showing of other facilities that are open longer. It's a very different type of restaurant that they're showing, and it's it's in areas in which you might sort of expect that. So I'm not sure that having residential so close and right above is compatible with something that's open to 2 a.m. Those were my comments.
Anybody else?
I had a few comments. It looked to me that all the restaurant deliveries were going to come down the driveway and happen in the rear yard because they have a direct stairway down to the cellar. So they made a statement that they were not using the rear yard for the restaurant, but in terms of the trash storage and I think deliveries, to me it's pretty obvious that they are. According to the Biz site, they had received a violation for removing one of the walls of the garage. So I'm just wondering, are they keeping the garage, or what are they going to do to the garage, because I have a feeling they're just going to use it for storage again, perhaps, for the restaurant. I was also curious if these residential units above are sprinklered, because there's no secondary means of egress, and it's 2 large dwelling units above a restaurant.
So it's not a multiple dwelling unless it's a dormitory.
And I would like them to provide some square footage, like the square footage of the restaurant. I see that, they say they have seating for 44, but when you count the actual seats, it's 48. So, and they don't give you like really the square footage of the restaurant area.
And I just had another thought. When on their drawings, they show where the signs are, and they sort of have this dashed outline for a canopy. And they don't really explain what that is going to be, whether it's just a
So
canopy or
provide a
does it have
drawing of-
signage on it. It's a very big canopy.
I think there is already a canopy there.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're showing a new one, so I don't know whether it's same or has it changed. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Anything else?
I think everybody has outlined most of the issues. My concern is also there are just so many different ramps outside the building and within the building. It is not clear at the end how the accessibility is going to be done in a very effortless manner. The other question I had is that if there is this driveway on the left-hand side of the property, which is fairly wide, which is 10-foot, 8 inches. Can that be used for parking of some of the vehicles? Because on the right-hand side, there is also another access way with a ramp, so which can allow whatever material that the restaurant needs for its delivery and or trash removal can be done through one side, but that would require relocating the residential entrance to the other side. But these are things that I think need to be looked at in a more comprehensive manner.
And if it is parking, of course, it's head-in parking, it has to be valet.
It has to be valet.
There's no way this
Right.
would work otherwise.
Yes.
Which then presents all these issues about pulling cars out
Onto the
and
street.
you end up parking them on the street while you put them back into the space. It's not ideal for parking.
It's
for
not
a restaurant.
ideal, but given that there is a parking issue the residents have raised, and
Yes.
the parking study has to be done in a correct time period, then only we can assess whether there is adequate parking on site in the area.
Yes, correct. And, you know, the only other comment that I wanted to make is this is a very strange remnant of residential existing on the Northern Boulevard frontage. And it's actually quite difficult, it seems to me, to find a conforming use for this building, and even the residential use above. I mean, I don't really understand who the target audience is on those two apartments. Mr. Euler is concerned about an SRO, otherwise known as a dormitory. But I understand that it would be quite difficult to rent those units to sort of your average family because of its location is very odd. You're surrounded by very intense commercial use. It's not like living next door to a little deli. You're living next door to these major car-oriented.
The lots are owned by the same owner.
Okay, but still, I mean, it doesn't have, its variance is only for the commercial use on the ground floor, right? So it's continuing to try to operate the upper floors in some complying fashion, and that's tricky, you know?
Well, we recently approved, I think, a renewal of another project which is directly across from this site, which has a residential above, and the ground floor was a use group 6 which is
Right.
being repaired, and we did approve it. So and it's in a residential district.
Right.
However, it had its own parking, so parking was not the issue.
Right.
But we do see that kind of mix of use group 6 and residential. But this this particular one is hemmed in
Yeah, that's
even
what
more.
I mean. Yeah. It's that it's
Wait.
hemmed in so much. It's
Yeah.
not, of course, it's typical in New York. Almost all of us live on top of a commercial, some kind of a commercial use, right? Many people live on top of restaurants. That's kind of standard life in New York, right? But this is very unusual because you have automotive uses squashing up against your two sides. There is residential at the rear.
It's almost as if it's sort of screaming to be owner occupied.
Yeah, right. And so, you know, there are some restaurants where they house their restaurant workers in themselves, but I don't get the impression that this is a big enough restaurant to need housing for that many people. Anyway, okay.
Item number 9, 6594BZ, 14402 Jewel Avenue, Queens.
Well, I was reviewing this and a little frustrated that we're still seeing some of the things that we had asked to be changed. I took a look again at the survey, and then I'm looking at the drawings, and then I'm looking at the survey again. I'm like, wait a minute. The planters in the trash enclosure are being placed on the public sidewalk. That's public way. You don't get to put your planters in your trash enclosure on city streets unless you have a revocable consent. And then I'm looking at the existing ramp that's all on the Jewel Avenue side, and I'm comparing it against the approved drawings. So ramps are allowed to be on public way because it's facilitating ADA access, and it's public policy that the city said you can put a ramp without a revocable consent, is my understanding, right? But if you look at that ramp, it has a planter on it, which is actually further forward of what was approved. So I don't know actually whether that is a permitted, let's say, fixture on a city sidewalk in terms of the ramp rules. Yeah, so there isn't any question in my mind unless there's a revocable consent here. The trash storage has to be taken care of on site within the property line. It's not an option, it's the law. Right? And then it's very confusing when you look at the survey, because the survey calls this area to the side on the what avenue, the Main Street side, they call that a side yard, but in fact it's a right-of-way to gain access to the backs of the buildings, or the fronts of the buildings, behind, right? So so that needs to be shown on the survey, because it's very confusing. It makes you think, well, you have this huge side yard, you have a 9-foot side yard, just put stuff in it. And you can't, because there's a right-of-way. The plans were supposed to clearly indicate on them, we spoke about this many times, use group for ambulatory care facility at the cellar and first floor, and use group 6B professional office on the second floor. There is no indication whatsoever on each floor plan about the uses, and on the first page there's a little chart and it's incorrect, and it doesn't tell you the use groups, it just tells you the uses, and it's incorrect. I don't know how that was missed. We discussed the signage at the last 2 hearings. The signage as existing and proposed is unsightly and needs to be changed to a single sign with inserts for the businesses. The proposed signs absolutely are not, contrary to what it says in the statement of facts or the cover letter, what was shown on the approved plans. The approved plans show a single 2x4 sign on the Main Street side to the left of the door, into which you insert the names of the businesses, and a single 3x5 lawn pylon sign at the corner, and a single name plaque on the Jewel Avenue side to the right of the door, which is also not in compliance. There's more signs on the Jewel Avenue side. So the signs are not in compliance, they need to be in compliance. The portion of the building that is an addition appears to need a coat of paint, and so does its railing. So it needs to be spruced up. The variances, these waivers come with a price. You have to maintain your property. You have to maintain it well, and it has to be an asset to the neighborhood, not a blight. Okay, those are my comments. I'm like frustrated with this applicant because we keep talking about this stuff over and over and over again. How long do you want to be here? You want to move in? I'm like...
I had repeatedly asked about the handicapped accessible toilet, and so their answer to me was just simply to label that the toilet was handicapped accessible. However, I think previously they show that it could be handicapped accessible because they give us the dimensions. I don't think, looking at the plan, it doesn't appear that it would be. So I think that they need to give me something a little more definitive, like give me the dimensions, make sure that, that everything fits the way it's supposed to.
You check it out against the rules about how you place the fixtures and so on.
Absolutely, and they have resisted this from the beginning, and I think that they need to really show us that there's a handicapped toilet on the first floor.
So the only thing that is a little tricky with this one is, I don't remember, I have to look at the date when that structure was built, but I believe at the time Local Law 58 was what was ruling, as opposed to ADA requirements that have larger requirements.
True.
Not to mention the fact that our code changed.
Absolutely.
Right? So they have to show it was compliant at the time of installation.
And they haven't been able to show that yet. And I'm assuming that what they filed with the building department, they filed a compliant toilet. So maybe show us the DOB drawings that were actually approved, and then give us a photograph of the installation. But they still haven't done it. I know.
Anybody else?
Nothing to add.
Item number 10, SEB 17494BZ 9907 Roosevelt Avenue, Queens.
Requested an adjournment.
Item number 11, 20197BZ 11902 Rockaway Boulevard, Queens.
They also requested an adjournment.
Item number 12, 4-98BZ 12704 Guy Brewer Boulevard, Queens.
Also an adjournment.
Yowza.
Yowzer.
Sorry. New cases. Item number 13, 1994BZ 3718 75th Street, Queens.
Okay. Okay. We do need, in order to follow along in the history of this site, a copy of the letter of substantial compliance. We have apparently the BSA drawings that were associated with that, but we need the complete package so we know that the drawings are the drawings that are referred to in the letter. In the November 2015 compliance certificate that was prepared by the architect, it states, prepared, signed, and sealed by the architect, it states that the required attendant restroom was not installed. The photographs confirm that there was no restroom of any kind installed, but the statement of facts, which isn't signed and sealed and certified, but in future probably will need to be, indicates that there's a portable toilet in place.
There is.
Yeah.
So there is now, okay.
Next to
So
the residential property line.
Okay.
Next to where
Well, next
the
to
multiple dwelling.
okay.
Not
So-
immediately next to it. There
But
is.
it's in the corner. On the plans, it's
No.
shown in the, adjacent to the guard shanty.
I was there just this weekend. I shop there quite frequently.
Oh.
So the porta potty is right next to the attendant booth.
Yeah.
And
Oh, they must have moved it.
Maybe because it's too hard to take it
Because I was
out
there a couple of
each
weeks
time.
ago, and it was all the way in the corner.
okay.
And if you look on Google Maps, it's all the way in the corner.
Oh.
But on the plans, it shows it next to the guard booth. So they must have
Yeah.
moved it to comply with the plans.
Well, but also, think about this. These are portable toilets. They get picked up, I hope frequently, but,
And put back in maybe a slightly different
and so for the truck to go in and have to go through a parking lot that's filled with cars doesn't work out. So you need to be able to maintain a clear area for the truck to pick it up. And in addition to which, that area that's at the corner is adjacent to residential use. So just thinking could be a nuisance, which
I'm
is
sure
the
it
theme that
is.
I wanted to talk about with this. Okay, so but the other part of this is we have an applicant who in this case is a professional, right? Or maybe, yeah, it's a professional. And so the applicant sees that there are conflicting data in their submission. Conform your data. Don't have everything in opposition to everything else. It doesn't look good, and sometimes it can very much hurt the application. Okay, so we've discussed, which this applicant wouldn't be aware of, we've discussed in another hearing the absence of permanent restroom facilities on parking lots. Portable toilets are temporary solutions that can easily be removed or never be installed, as was the case here, and can also prove to be a nuisance to neighbors if not well maintained, which might have already been the case here. We need to hear about the health department and DOB's position on such permanent uses of portable toilets. I don't think that's what these things were intended for. But my instincts tell me that for a use that's been in operation for 20 years, is applying for a 10-year extension and may apply for another 10-year extension, it's about time a permanent facility is installed. So I just don't think that the porta potties or whatever are how you deal with this issue. And I feel really sorry for the guys who work at the parking lot, and that's what they have to deal with. It's a probably not even particularly sanitary. A lot of them have running water now, but those are the deluxe models. The ones you see on construction sites, I don't think have running water. Okay. It appears from the photographs also that the fence is being bent by cars that are permitted by the bumper locations to get too close to them. The bumpers need to be pulled back to anticipate reasonable front or rear end distances. The fences need to be repaired to be vertical and unbent, and the area needs to be weeded. The approved drawings show the bumpers located about 3 feet away from the fence, but the photos show them much closer, and some bumpers and wheel stops shown on the drawings are missing. For whatever reason, which I think is unfortunate, the board never asked if this lot had perimeter landscaping, in particular along the lot lines shared with residential uses or along the street line of this largely residential block. In some cases, we've asked applicants to install landscaping. In this case, it would reduce the number of parking spaces. In those cases, it didn't reduce the number of parking spaces, so I'm not sure how other board members feel about that. Commissioner Otley Brown's comment was that was concerned about the direction of the outdoor lighting and to make sure it faces downward and the brightness is reduced. So we need to see a lumens drawing that indicates what the lighting is, specific specs on it, and to show the flood of the lighting. Any other comments?
As I said, this is a location I frequent pretty much once a week, so I go by this facility quite often. And one thing on the lumen, the other day I was there in the evening, there was just about adequate light. It was not too bright, it was just kind of, and it was away from the resident, but we need to have that noted and make sure it is meeting all the requirements. This parking facility is extremely well used. And so I agree with you, it is not going away, it is in demand. This is Jackson Heights, the Indian shopping center. It's like a lot of people come there on weekends, and it is very well utilized. So I think asking for a permanent restroom is not a wrong thing in this case. The residential uses that it abuts on both sides, it's a mix of residential and doctor's office and medical offices, and to the rear is all commercial operations. So we should try to find a balance of providing fencing and landscaping on the two sides. I'm not sure about the rear because that's backing up against all commercial operation.
Oh, I thought, because they provided a section that showed one part of the rear where there's actually trees that are on the other property.
On the other property.
That has residential on the floors above. There's like a dentist's office on the ground floor and residential on the floors above.
Those are all offices. That's facing 74th Street.
Yeah.
And those are
At the rear? Where the trees are at the rear?
Yeah, those are all offices.
Oh, their own section. Okay, so then that means they're going to need to update the uses,
At least,
or make,
I
you know
mean,
what?
I can go and check again, but...
No, but actually, you shouldn't have to do that. They should be doing that. So what we need is not a simple land
Yeah.
use map.
This, see, it looks like the rest of the residential, but pretty much all of those are businesses.
So improperly businesses? Whatever. Right. I think what would help us then is for them to do the occupancy survey, not us, so that we can know what the adjacencies are. That way we'll be able to tell whether we've got only commercial uses or some residential uses that are affected by this, and therefore figure out what the fencing situation would be. But I do think because the street itself is residential in character, the fact that this is just a fence and there's nothing else indicates to me that there should be landscaping at least along the front perimeter. But that would eliminate parking spaces, right? Unless there's a way for them to slightly rejigger, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a very tight parking spot, and there oftentimes I'm not able to park there because it's just packed. So, and weekend is when it's most utilized. And there is a need for it. There isn't enough parking, on-street parking in the area. So we just need to figure out a balance that addresses.
Right. Okay, so we should talk about, you know, what would be, I don't know if there's an architect involved in this project, it's a parking lot, but if there is an architect, it'd be good to talk to him or her about this. So in terms of the issue about adjacent uses, it can't be just that database land use, right? It's all land use info. It should be from doing a site survey and actually looking at the actual uses, what it says on the buzzers, that kind of thing.
Maybe these are residential plus commercial.
Sorry, can't.
Maybe these are residential with commercial operations. I pretty much, they're all the signs are all commercial signs. So that's why I'm trying to.
Well, they could even be home offices. They could be, there's a lot of different things they could be.
That's possible.
As opposed to something really illegal. Okay.
Item number 14, 18005 BZ, 1511 3rd Avenue, Manhattan.
They asked for an adjournment on this.
Appeals calendar, decision items. Item number 15, 2016 4227A, 112 feet Fleet Place, Brooklyn.
So we have fire department sign off. In the fire department's letter, they state that they confirmed, or it has been confirmed, so I'm not sure what that means, that there are no plans to widen Fleet Place and the project will not extend beyond the existing street. I mean, I think we knew that anyway, that there's no plans to improve Fleet Place, so I think we're good with this.
And we received DOT and DEP.
Yeah. Sorry? We have DOT, we had that.
And DEP.
Or what? DEP?
And DEP.
DEP.
Yeah.
Oh. We do. Oh, yeah, we have DEC, letter of no objection, and a DEP comment, which was just about, yeah.
So we have all signers.
Yeah. They had asked, this is an old set of comments, it's an August set of comments from DEP, where they asked for some minor changes to the drawings. They wanted to show the width of the mapped Fleet Place and the width of the widening portion of Fleet Place, things like that. I'm assuming that those things
They got a revised
were
site
picked
plan.
up.
I think.
Yeah.
Well, we have a current letter from them, so.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
Revised surveys.
Oh, we haven't updated, okay. We do?
We
Can
do.
we just check that, the DEP totally, so they updated their comment of August 9th?
I'm not sure if it was put in SharePoint. I think you emailed us a letter,
Oh,
I
okay.
emailed the DEP sign off.
Okay,
but
so
it
that
should be
doesn't-
in SharePoint.
So that's a problem. If, you know, you do a search and you don't see it in your email, then you don't see it.
It should have been uploaded though to SharePoint.
Okay, so it was, so I didn't see it in SharePoint, but anyway, if you could just check, because that way, and make
Yeah.
sure that we're totally good, then.
I remember Tony sending us an email because it came, I think,
It came the same day as the
same
hearing.
day as the hearing. If we had gotten it earlier, we may have been able to close and grant. They did it
Yeah.
at like 4 o'clock or something,
Yeah.
but we didn't really get it
Oh,
till
so
the
it
next
was in
day.
the old
But Tony,
folder.
and I remember her making a comment about that, but I don't remember seeing it in SharePoint either.
Oh,
Okay.
But I'm not, I could be wrong.
oh, sorry about that. Or, well, for sure, I know I sent it to everybody.
Well, I do remember the email.
Okay, I'm
I'm
sorry.
just looking at what was loaded on January 18th. Fire department on January 8th. That's the only email that shows up when I do a search.
I don't remember getting an email.
Oh, wait. No, I take it back.
It's in
January
SharePoint?
12th, attached is the DEP sign-off. Okay.
But it didn't make it to SharePoint?
Didn't make it to SharePoint, or if it did, I didn't find it. It says, January 12th, there are 12-inch diameter, the applicant has submitted an architectural survey for the above referenced location. Survey shows 60 feet map Fleet plate, 50 feet will be available for the installation. Has no objection. Okay. January 9th letter from DEP.
Oh, actually, it is here. It's in its own folder. DEP sign off
Okay.
1/9/17.
Okay, good.
It did make it to
And
SharePoint.
DEP. All right, all stand corrected, because you know that Tony's always right.
Yeah. Okay, good. So we're good.
Okay.
So we're good for tomorrow?
Yes, good.
Okay, good.
Yes. All right.
Okay. New cases, item number 16, 2016, 4245A Manhattan Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay. We need a community board recommendation, which we don't have. We do have fire department sign off. The statement of fact refers to objections from the Department of Building Staten Island Borough Commissioner. This is Brooklyn.
I didn't correct that. I'll take another look. I thought we corrected that. I thought we
Yes. Yeah.
I thought we swapped that out. I'll check that.
Okay.
I thought we swapped
The
that.
objection, you know, there's problems with the objections. So the objections are for 4004, 4006, 4008 Manhattan Avenue, and 4001 Neptune Avenue. I just want to, I know it's on the corner of Neptune, but the application here
It says
is
410.
404 to 410. We just have to get the address right, whatever the assigned address is. It might be AKA Neptune, I don't know.
Yeah, oftentimes the addresses will be different, and they're the same property.
Right.
And we have ways of checking that and confirming it so that council's office should know. The borough block and lot, or the block and lot, should be consistent.
Right.
Though. If
That rules.
that
block
doesn't,
and lot is
there's
one
not,
of the
like, addresses there's addresses all over the place, right?
Right.
But block and lots, while they do change over time, they're not multiple ones for the same lot.
But then if your application has an objection for 4001 Neptune, shouldn't your application, when we have on the heading the addresses, at least be the same? Just makes it a little easier,
Yes, ma'am.
right?
Totally agree. Yes.
I'm just like, but, okay. And then the other problem, which is bigger, is there's a tax map that was provided that only shows lot 119.
Right.
The survey shows that there's going to be tentative lot subdivision, but it hasn't assigned lot number, so how does it know? So we need the tentative apportionment map. Also, I'd like to know whether these tax lots, well, the way that these zoning calculation sheets were prepared, it implies to me that the tax lots are also going to be zoning lots. In that case, I'd like to get confirmation from DOB that the corner lot on Neptune and Manhattan complies with zoning, because it doesn't have a consistent minimum lot width of 18 feet. It's shaped like a triangle with a rounded leg, sort of, you know, and the apex is very small. I'm not sure whether DOB would permit that kind of subdivision anymore. Because you could argue that that's creating a potential variance case.
But I did have that second, on the objection sheet, they had that second objection for zoning, which I was like, well, why is that on that?
That's the frontage rule, right?
No, the 7201, that it's, you know, if there's any zoning non-compliances due to
right.
the location of the map, of the street, that they'll be waived or whatever. So I didn't, it wasn't specific if there were any.
Right.
Yeah,
That
it's
is
for
not,
36, it
that is
wasn't
not
supposed to.
available for GCL 36s.
Yes. Right, oh, that's
So-
true.
Yeah.
That's in
So
a
if they
bed of a
have,
map
if they have a
street.
zoning non-compliance, that is that would need to be addressed under a
Yeah,
separate
separate.
action. And as the chair alluded to, the subdivision cannot be the reason for that variance. I would just advising, you know, from the dais here.
As you should. So, yeah, I would actually like to hear that DOB has signed off on that subdivision. And maybe the reason we don't see a subdivision map is because it hasn't yet been approved for subdivision.
Very possibly.
Right. The survey also doesn't indicate what the unmapped or mapped street conditions are, although it indicates record widths without referring to the record. We're trying to clarify what all of these unmapped streets are for current and future use. So I understand that all of this is part of an association and privately owned, but we need to understand how were the streets sort of created, mapped by something, mapped by the association, owned by the association. Also like to know where the crosswalk is relative to the curb cut on the corner lot. I think there might be interference with it. There's an email from the borough president's office that states that this area is made up of private streets, hence are unmapped and are not maintained by the city, nor do they receive city services, so that clarifies that. That's useful. So then I asked myself, does the homeowners association rules or whatever make clear who is responsible for maintenance and services? And then happily that information was provided, which I'll get into in a second, just because I'm reading in order of my thoughts. The existing sidewalk and curbs of this site are in really bad shape or missing and need to be replaced. That's also true for the asphalt in this street. However, the builder's pavement plan shows that that's proposed to be done. I would like DOT to review the builder's pavement plan the way we normally have DOT review these submissions and not wait until it goes to DOB and then it's too late for us to do anything about it. In part, I was looking at the specifications and then I checked them against Department of Transportation specs and they seem to match. So it's probably fine, but just send it to Tika or
To have them take a look at it?
yeah. There's a street tree shown on Manhattan Avenue on the site plan that's not shown on the builder's pavement plan. We want the street tree, unless there's a reason why it can't be there. The Seagate Homeowners Association rules are very instructive, I found, for future projects that come here. I think it's really a model association set of rules. I'd like to figure out how they did it because they somehow arranged to have the Environmental Control Board issue violations to homeowners for homeowners' failure to maintain sidewalks, keep their lawns nice, lots of things like that. Pick up, just lots of things. And they provide for punishments for failure to comply that include revocation of certain community privileges. That really works in Seagate because it's a gated community. They just say, sorry, find a hotel. I guess. And I actually, because I did look up a little bit on this and I found a couple of lawsuits, or several actually, where Seagate sues its residents for failure to, say, pay dues or comply or something like that. So they make good on their promise. However, I didn't find in the Seagate bylaws anything that specifically states that the association is responsible for maintaining the streets and utilities, although that seems to be implied in a section that's called Public Works Committee that says the committee's responsible for the public works. I just don't really know what that is because, in fact, there are no public works on the site. Everything is privately installed and maintained. According to one case I found online, which was Seagate versus Vosny, Seagate is responsible for maintaining the streets, sewers, fencing, parks, playgrounds that it owns. I'd like to, the court obviously came to that conclusion based on some documents. I'd like to see what the documents are that establish this. And we also need to see the easements that give the homeowners of these new lots the right of access on the private streets, which is long access. So fascinating. Anybody else? Anybody else with this one?
Well, I miscorrectly spoke about the objection. It's actually a general, it's not 7201, it's like a whole bunch of different things saying that there are no zoning regulations for a home that doesn't front on an unmapped street. So it's like a
Yeah.
whole, we don't know what it is.
It's true, there's no
FAR.
setbacks,
That's
but
what,
that's not true. The street is defined as a way.
Yeah, so.
That's been,
And
yeah.
perhaps
Right.
Strings can speak more to this. My experience with, say, these co-op communities or associations where they're all on one single zoning law or on not mapped streets is that there is, the DOB looks at the zoning sort of, which often appears
In an
to-
aggregate, yeah.
yeah, it's sort of a low density, and they say, oh, well, here's the sweater, but everything is inside of the, they're not a good fit for zoning, and often will defer to the homeowners associations or the co-op boards and their rules for development, and just say, is it safe? Is it, you know, and the zoning sort of just becomes this container
Umbrella, yeah.
that it all fits in. So there, the zoning analysis is somewhat
true, but it's on the
secondary,
objection sheet as long as we're not waiving anything.
Yeah, we're
that's
not
fine.
waiving it.
So,
Yeah.
We're not empowered.
Yeah, and there would, are we actually really waiving that?
Oh, wait a second. So if the, so this is making an assumption about Seagate that we don't know, which is why we need to actually understand this. If a street is defined as a way, these are streets that have been there for a very long time, right? So it seems like they meet the definition of street from a zoning perspective, therefore setback rules apply,
Yeah.
right? And then the association, you know, it's different. I actually don't know how Forest Hills work, which is actually has a very strong association, but I believe that each of those houses is subject to zoning restrictions
Yeah.
because it's not one giant zoning lot, right? They subdivided it into lots and lots of little zoning lots, and the only thing that is owned is are the streets. So my understanding is, in this case, from a little bit that I could read from the Seagate v. Vosny case, is that Seagate owns the streets, and it owns the parks, and it owns that stuff, but it doesn't own the land on which these people are building, so they become subject to zoning. These are tax lots, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think
If
it's
it's
that there
one-
is no zoning and
It's not that there's no zoning, but I think what Ryan is, at least what I understood what we talked about, is when there is a large zoning lot, and then you've sort of carved up that zoning lot into little streets with lots on it, but it remains one big zoning
But
lot.
I don't know that that's a case here. I'm not sure why that would be the case here. So, yeah.
I'm asking for the
Maybe
status of the zoning
clarification on
lines.
exactly how.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
okay.
divvied up.
And usually the rules are, the co-op or you know, association rules are stricter than zoning would.
But that's different. That's because you're joining, as a purchaser of land, you buy with, in this case, it's sort of effectively restrictive covenants, even though they don't have them apparently in Seagate. But you're not allowed to purchase here, and the courts have decided that part of the terms of the purchase is conformance with the rules and regulations of the association. So it's not, so it's effectively a restrictive covenant that regulates how you operate and how you build and so on, but you're still very much a part of the city zoning network.
And the homeowners association, or whatever the agreement is, can't subsume any of the laws from the municipality, right? It can't say, well,
we don't-
forget zoning, you can
Yeah, they
build
don't
right to your
ever-
lot
yeah.
line, because that's what we allow, and therefore you can do it.
Sweater
Right.
is looser.
Right.
This
So-
is an R31.
Yeah.
Semi-detached homes and.
Right. And to that point, counsel for the applicant provides zoning analyses that show it's compliant with the zoning. The lot areas are correct, the setbacks are correct, and all that sort of stuff. So I don't see any reason to think that this is one gigantic zoning lot made up of blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks. Okay, so let's dispense with that.
But the-
Okay, we're not waiving any
We're not
zoning.
We're not
any
waiving
zoning,
anything.
but
We do have to
said there
approve
is
a
an
site
objection.
plan.
Yeah.
And there is that objection, which is very general.
Okay, so we need more information about that because we're not waiving, we'll make clear.
We're not waiving.
No zoning is being waived here. That's why I want to know that the configuration of that one triangular bowed lot complies with DOB's idea of what that minimum width of a zoning lot looks like, 18-foot minimum width. Do they think that means throughout the width of the zoning lot? That seems to me what it means. Minimum width is minimum width, so I'm not sure. Okay. Okay.
Zoning calendar?
I'm sorry, the way to, well, no, I don't know if it would cure it. The way to cure that is, of course, not combine, subdivide all tax lots, but then I can't remember whether you can have two separate houses on one, yeah, you can
Yeah,
have two
you can.
separate houses on one zoning lot, so, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so then that's the way you could cure that. Okay. Ready? Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Zoning calendar decision items, item number 17, 10115 BZ, 830 Hicksville Road, Queens.
They did provide an updated parking, sorry, just lost what I was reading. They did provide an updated parking study that showed parking demand during the evening weekday hours when demand on the use would be, according to the study, approximately 33 spaces. The study shows that there are presently 150 or so parking spaces available at that time within 2 blocks of the site. And this is surely, in large part, has something to do with the fact that there are several institutional uses in the area that are closed in the evening, so it kind of opens up all of these parking spaces. The drawings were also corrected to show the correct roofline conditions, but I don't see anywhere, and I looked and I looked and I looked, the refrigerated trash storage or dry trash storage areas at the interior of the building. That was something we discussed way back in December. We kind of lost that thread, but it doesn't mean that you don't have to have it. And again, this is for a house of worship, so there's to be no portion of this building used for commercial catering. If there's any kind of catering, it has to be associated with the members of the congregation. Okay? Anybody else? Everybody okay with the traffic study and the conclusion?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Item number 18, 16015 BZ, 186 Montague Street, Brooklyn.
They did provide a first floor plan, again, to show ADA access to the PCE and corrected the detail reference, which was sending us to the wrong page. However, I still don't see a community board recommendation or a copy of a photo in the lobby that showed the posting. I think that's what was shown at the hearing. I know there was something handed out at the hearing to show that notice to tenants was given, but I don't remember whether it was the notice or it was a photograph showing the notice installed. Whatever it was, please get it into the submit immediately, along with the community board recommendation, which I never found. Okay.
So community board recommendation and the photo of the lobby posting of the notice of the hearing, or?
So, yeah, so we had asked that, and they did it. We had asked that because this is an Orange Theory Fitness and we've had some problems with that particular use,
Yeah, right.
we asked that the tenants be notified of this hearing, and they brought to the last hearing proof that they had done that, and no tenants came to the hearing or sent any objections. So we were saying then that that indicates that it's not proving to be a difficulty in the building, unlike the other building where it was a nightmare.
But they never submitted it.
They actually didn't submit it formally, or if they did, it went into the netherworld of
Okay.
cyberspace. Okay, and then this is just a kind of a note to all the project managers in general when we do these PCEs. The first floor should be provided every single time, no matter what floor the PCE is on, so we don't end up having that as a missing thread. We need to know how do you get into the building, and in an emergency, how do you get out? Okay.
So you need a first floor plan too?
Well, we have it here, but we had to ask for it at the last minute, which they provided, which prevented us from voting on this last time. And that should be something standard that's asked of every applicant of the PCEs. Okay.
Item number 19, 17115B, I'm sorry, you ready? 17115BZ, 281 Broadway, Manhattan.
Okay, the plans were submitted that did clarify the sprinkler installation. In fact, one of them is a sprinkler drawing. And the detail on the flooring, the drawing is not like the best quality drawing I've ever seen about a detail, but they did add some more information about those built-up dropping platforms. But then the sets that were submitted and put into the record are all messed up. There's 3 copies of each drawing in the record set, and it's missing the first pages of the drawing. So it's like pages 3, 4, 5, but what happened to 1, 2? And I think there's even a page 7 or 6 and 7 that's missing. So we need a complete set, and that needs to be submitted immediately to clean the set up. So do that right now. Anybody else on it tonight?
Item number 20, 27715BZ, 2621 and 2623 Avenue R, Brooklyn.
The drawing was properly modified to clarify what the zoning floor area is at the attic level for the areas above 8 feet, and what the area of the portion is between 5 feet and 8 feet. Hence, we can say that we are approving a .86 FAR building that is more in line with the FARs in the neighborhood, but that we acknowledge for DOB purposes the presence of the portion of the attic with a ceiling height between 5 and 8 feet. The resolution must state clearly that in an R2 zoning district, which this is, the zoning resolution defines floor area as attic space providing structural headroom of 8 feet or more. So it doesn't define as zoning structural headroom of between 5 and 8 feet under any circumstances. It also doesn't say whether or not used for residential purposes. There's no qualifier. I think perhaps some of the confusion is when you look at the definition of floor area in attic, there are some zoning districts where, like in the R2A, R2X, R3, R4, where it's structural headroom of 5 feet or more, but this isn't one of them. So I don't understand how DOB is concluding that that 5 to 8 foot area is floor area. So I feel rather confident that our approval of the .86 FAR and an acknowledgement of the rest should get the applicant where they need to get, as long as our resolution states this. Because, yeah. Anybody else? Okay.
I just want to say this diagram was very helpful, and in any, for the special permits, it would be helpful to provide that to kind of get in the difference between the 5 foot and the 8 foot headroom clearance.
Yes.
This was diagrammatically well documented.
Yes, I agree, and it took us a while to get there, and we were very confused because it looked like you walked down a little 1.5 foot tunnel in order to get to the attic, and that's not at all the case. Okay.
Okay, good. Item number 21, 2016-1212BZ, 932 Southern Boulevard, Bronx.
Okay, they did provide a revised objection. I just want to make sure that council's okay with the revised objection, because we don't want to go back. So if you could take a look at it, and, okay. That was all that was open.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, they were okay? All right.
Okay. Continued hearing items. Item number 22, 259-14BZ, 6874 Trinity Place, Manhattan.
With respect to the use of the area within the rear yard at the office floors, they did provide programming information on support diagrams in the planning principles package. That information needs to be shown on the main set of plans. That is the actual layouts, because the waiver at those levels depends on that programmatic requirement. However, while I now understand the need for program space at the office floors, I don't understand why it can't be accommodated in the front in lieu of the setback at 6 and 7. It seems like that setback at 6 and 7 is a design option, and it's sort of a design decision, right? I also still don't understand how the outdoor space at 8 will be used. So there's this really great outdoor space, but it's adjacent to offices, and there's a very sort of limited access to it. And the statement of facts that says that that 8th floor outdoor space will be used for public functions, but there's no interior spaces other than a catering prep room to support that. So what do you do when it rains in the middle of your public function? Or yeah, I'm just not understanding at all how that's being used, unless it's really just the result of a setback, in which case it doesn't have a programmatic function, which is okay because that part's not part of the waiver, unless you're opting for the setback in lieu of complying with the regulations, which I think might be the case on the 6th and 7th floor. The planning program also made clear, which was very important, which we needed to have done, the relationship of the parish hall to the bridge, the parish hall dimensions, and how they fit between the structure and the core, and how that drives the size of the floor plates on the podium. So the parish hall really is of a specific dimension, and it's squished between columns and building core, and so there's nowhere else to go, and you need a corridor. You can't go right into the parish hall, so you need a corridor that wraps. And I'll just read Commissioner Otley Brown's comments on this one. I think they did a good job expanding on the answers that they gave in the hearing regarding the programmatic need for the spaces. Still, there isn't any real programmatic support for extending into the northern rear yard for the 6th and 7th floor office spaces, because the plans only show a few workstations in that area and a very open floor plan for the rest of the floors. I think in that case, she didn't have a chance to see the that other set of information, which is another reason why that other set of information that really breaks down the functions and tells you what all the particular uses are. That's why that needs to be on our main set of plans and not just as support information. But she believes that it's a small ask, so she would be in support of the project. Anybody else on this?
I thought that this submission was extremely helpful to really understand their program and why they needed the spaces that they needed. I thought it was well put together in a form that was easy to understand. I agree that if they can transfer some of that onto drawings, it'll make it even easier to understand. I did not have anything further. I don't think I understand about the 8th floor terrace, and maybe they can explain if that really has an impact on programming, but otherwise I am okay.
I agree. This submission was very helpful in helping me understand why the waiver is required, especially and the one to the north. That one, yeah. Definitely the stacking of the staircases and the restrooms and everything was very clear. Without that, it would have required jiggering a lot of the stairways and restroom areas, so that was very clear to me, and also the need for the southern one, which is with regards to the core structure and the elevator. This was a very helpful documentation, and I don't have any concerns going forward.
I'm fine with the submission.
Thank you. Oh, I also want to just make a note that like all of the institutions religious institutions we see that have large spaces that are used, have names like multi-purpose and so on, that they are not to be used as for-profit commercial banquet hall or catering facilities, and the use is only to be used for, in this case, parishioners' functions. Okay.
Item number 23, 33114BZ, 2171 Ocean Parkway, Brooklyn.
So finally, a submission was made showing second floor joists of the existing house to be retained. The side yards are compliant as they were in the prior submission with sections 23461 and 2348. Second and third floors were pulled back to create a 25 feet at the rear yard, and they provided support for the building height by providing information about existing buildings on the block. Although they revealed the one next door seems to be taller than was permitted by the DOB approval, even though the height would have been permitted as of right. So I'm finally, at long last, okay with this. Anybody else?
No. If this information was provided earlier, we could have made this decision earlier.
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah. I wish that message would be heard. Okay.
Item number 24, 2016-4164BZ, 1744 East 29th Street, Brooklyn.
Unlike on this application, so I listened to the hearing, which was a long hearing and a complex one. I listened to that hearing that was on November 1st, and I heard the discussion about the suggestion that there be an as-of-right two-step option, or a way to consider an analysis with an as-of-right two-step option, and that being essentially an expansion on the meaning of neighborhood character. I also heard that I was extremely clear to the applicant in requesting that studies be done to establish that both the front and the rear yard proposed incursions comport with neighborhood character. The submission, on the other hand, didn't make any attempt whatsoever to establish the neighborhood character finding for either the front or the rear. There was only the, quote, discovery of additional floor area to support the concept of the as-of-right two-step process, and an axonometric was submitted to show what step one would look like. My request for studies was simply ignored. At the last hearing, I asked that the architect attend to discuss the project with us. In this case, if the architect does not come tomorrow, we'll adjourn the hearing. I don't want to have a conversation only with the lawyer anymore.
Email it in.
With respect to neighborhood character, I have to, and our conversation, I have to return to the CPC report. This one was issued not in 1998, but in September 21st, 2016, which was just a little over a month before the last hearing we had. So I wasn't aware of it. I don't think anybody else was. I don't know that we had known that it was voted on. It was issued by CPC in connection with the modification to this special permit 73622 that removed Community Board 10 from applicability. In that report, CPC, the drafters of this legislation, both in 98 and in its modification, stated the intent of this special permit was to provide a means for growing families to add a bedroom, bathroom, or extend a kitchen within certain limitations that would allow the enlargement consistent with the existing neighborhood character. I don't see how CPC could have been any clearer than that, existing neighborhood character. That statement is also consistent with the thinking at the time in 1998, at the time of the enactment of that section, during which time we received letters, which I've read and hearing many times, from then CPC Chair Joe Rose and then City Planning General Counsel David Karnofsky, expressing the intent of the words neighborhood character as applying to existing conditions, not future conditions. And in short, I don't choose here, and I insist on this, to make an exception to the long-held and long-standing position of the board, in spite of an occasional unsupportable sway away from tradition, and risk modifying the neighborhood character finding, which would, by the way, impact the outcomes of almost every application that comes before this board, to include what could be done as of right in a two-step process. And that's that. Also, the sections that were provided need to show existing floor joists to be retained at all levels, and don't. And then we need the neighborhood studies, otherwise there's just no way to figure out what to do here. Any other comments? Thanks.
New cases, item number 1, 12815BZ through 13015BZ, 680, 682, 684 Van Duzer Street, Staten Island.
Okay, so, the community board voted unanimously to deny the application, citing flooding and neighborhood character concerns. Borough President Otto is also opposed to this project, primarily because the two proposed curb cuts, which take up 26 feet of the 50-foot wide frontage, exit into the signalized T intersection of a major access route that takes you to the Staten Island Expressway. The applicant really needs to respond to the community board and borough president's very specific comments and recommendations. A traffic analysis is therefore needed here, but I note, though I don't understand it, that DOT signed off on the curb cut locations on condition that the crosswalk be repositioned to clear them. Doesn't seem to be concerned about cars backing out into the signalized intersection that's this busy thoroughfare, but on the other hand was not provided with any traffic studies at all on the timing of the signalized intersections.
Also, if you do that, if you straighten out that crosswalk, I think you then start to push back traffic. You know, if there's a lane of traffic that needs to make that left turn, then you start to push that back. And
Well, there's a
it wasn't
stop
clear to
line.
me whether, yeah, that stop line has to then move
Right, and
back.
there's a curb cut in between the crosswalk and the stop line.
So I don't think that they analyzed sort of in total exactly what happens now with traffic now being backed up on that street.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay, so back up at the
At the-
red light,
At the
basically.
red light, you have to now reposition the cars, are going to now be further back. That was just my...
You know, no, that's true. I mean, it's obviously, this needs a serious traffic study on the impact on that intersection. In arguing uniqueness, the applicant talked about the lack of access from Grimes Hill. I know that Commissioner Montanez knows what this is, but I don't know where it is, and it wasn't shown on any of the drawings. So I tried on Google Earth, and it doesn't know what Grimes Hill is, etc.
Well, Grimes Hill is a neighborhood, and it's at the top of the hill, and there's very large, beautiful homes, and they do things like they'll chop down trees to get a better view of the Verrazano, and then there's all these homes that occur at the bottom of the hill, who are concerned about, you know, removing, you know, vegetation from the, it's a very steep slope.
Yes.
So,
But it said lack of access from Grimes Hill as a disadvantage. It has access from
Van
another
Duzer,
place.
right.
So is it that you're not you don't have access from a fancy neighborhood, therefore that's a disadvantage?
Well, I guess some of the lots have access from Grimes Hill. You know, they're not really built that far down the hill, but, you know, in the future they might be.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I see there's some roads that go up to the top, and
Right.
some that are mapped to do that and then don't do that. Yeah, okay. There are several developments along Van Duzer that show that they were built into the hill without variances, such as the Jake Court development that's 2 lots away to the south, which was built in 2004. I'd like the applicant to discuss why these sites, which were burdened with a similar slope, did not suffer a hardship for which relief was needed. I think they talked a little bit, it's a different zoning. They talked about that, but, you know, that doesn't really, how does that impact the requested variance? I also note that the Jake Court project is in a C41, where attached dwellings are permitted, so their request in terms of typology is consistent with development immediately to the south of the site. This is also shown in a map that the applicant provided, that indicates many developments of attached homes to the immediate south of the site in the C41 and the R3A districts that have buildings cut into the hillside. Both of those districts predate the special purpose district designation in 1987. So it's not like this applicant just didn't get into the C41 zoning pool in time. That happened a long time ago. The proposed houses, though, are very narrow at 15 feet wide. We get applications for variances where they say the house is too narrow. It's only 15 feet wide.
Exterior to exterior.
Yes.
That's not counting.
Right, that's out to
structure.
out. So we're talking about a 13 or 14 foot wide house. And they pose a problem, as we've discussed, with respect to the location of the curb cut. So I'd like to know why can a portion, they were talking about how impossible or how costly it would be to improve Broad Street through the length of the site. That's if they were building an as-of-right project, right? But if we were talking about a minimum variance or, let's say, a more neighborhood context or a neighborhood sympathetic variance, what if a portion of Broad Street was improved just long enough to allow access from the side of the lot? So then you're going straight up Broad Street, signalized intersection, light changes, you go straight, and nobody's backing up into the intersection. And I don't see that would prove that much of a hardship to address that. The May 29th, 2015, because this has been going on for a long time for some reason, city planning letter suggests that the applicant apply along with the other requested waivers for a use waiver that's available to tier 2 sites under section 119-321. I'd like to understand why, as long as you're going to city planning and you're going through the whole process, why that wasn't done as like a package that travels together. And then city planning asked way back when for clarity on the ownership of Broad Street. And I don't know whether that's been obtained. I didn't see clarity on the ownership of Broad Street. That was a question asked 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago. In this, also I'd like to understand, is this building properly characterized as a multifamily or as 3 attached one-family buildings? If it's a 3-family, I suggest that would have to comply with the multiple dwelling law, which among other things means 2 means of egress from each unit. So, which I think it has, but in other words, there are multiple dwelling law requirements if you characterize it as a 3-family as opposed to 3 attached houses, if that's a correct definition for what they are. And then I'll read Commissioner Otley Brown's comments. Or actually, maybe I'll read them second because hers are only financial, since she did think they had made the case for the A finding. So I'll go on to others and come back to her comments because they're long and they're about the financials.
I agree. I had a question about why they didn't explore utilizing Broad Street, even just as, a portion, build it out to however long you needed to be able to get access to one of those units. I also was not really clear or felt that it wasn't expressed well enough why a slightly larger semi wouldn't work here. So it would be 2 units, but slightly larger. You'd only need 4 parking spaces, I guess, at that point instead of 6. And if you did open up Broad Street, then you'd only then be talking about 2 cars going in and out from that intersection. You heard my comments about the intersection. In any case, I think that bears more scrutiny and sort of in a broader way. It was also unclear to me how they were handling, or they didn't really explain it, but how they were going to handle the runoff from the hill. It is a very steep hill, and granted, having a lot of foliage helps you with runoff, but they kind of dug out this terraced area in the back, which now you're going to have a somewhat large retaining wall. So where is that water going? It's going to go around the retaining wall, but you're supposed to be able to keep a certain amount of water right on your site. And although he's got dry wells down at the bottom, it means it's got to come through the building in some way to get down, or come through the foundation to get down to your dry well. So I just had questions whether or not they really sort of thought that through enough. Also, can they clarify whether it's 2 or 3 stories? In their revised drawings, they say they have 2-story buildings, but
It's a basement, it's a cellar, it's a first floor.
Basement and 2 floors.
And it changes. And
So it's a full-story.
It's really
the designation changes all throughout the
all
application. You don't know
throughout.
what
And
they
even
are.
in their as-of-right, I was wondering why the as-of-right has a cellar, but in the same configuration in their proposal, it's really a basement.
Right.
So I have concerns about that because that also goes to light and air in habitable spaces. And they've got, significant run where they have no windows, right? You only get the back and the front, and you've got all this stuff in the middle. So I think they need to kind of look at the plan itself and make sure that it actually works in this sort of linear fashion back into the hill.
So it's looking at the plan in multiple sections. That's
Correct.
part of it, because what's happening on the side, how much of a clearing are they making as they go up the hill?
Yeah.
Are they flattening it out like some of the houses further down? They just created this table and then they put the houses on the table, right? Is that what this is, or is it built into the hillside?
Yeah, it wasn't clear from their sections, and they show an outline of sort of the hillside, but I'm not sure whether that hillside is actually up against your wall, or have you created some sort of side yard area in which now you can have windows on that side. I don't know. It was not.
Also, shouldn't the basement be counted as a floor area?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which in...
Well, it goes to the question of what is
Right.
this? Because you're going to change it each time.
In the proposed,
It's not
it has not been counted, and in the as-of-right, the cellar, which is same as the basement for the proposed, is not counted in the floor area. So I think that there really needs to be a reassessment and a clarification of what is the base plane, and from the base plane, what is being considered a basement and what is being considered a cellar, and from there onwards, calculate the floor area. That has been the most confusing part for me on this, because it's more than what is permitted. And if that's the case, then that's another waiver. That's not being presented.
Okay, when I read the minutes for the city planning meeting, it says in there that Broad Street is unmapped, it's not improved, and that this is not a corner lot. So I was a little surprised that they're going to city planning to get the corner lot waiver. And the big thing that matters regarding that is they're proposing a 20-foot side yard, which is at the rear of the buildings, instead of a 30-foot side yard. So,
Well,
I was just,
But it is, I mean, just because you don't create a retaining wall at 30 feet doesn't mean that whole thing isn't your yard, right?
that's true. You've got a point there. That's right.
That, it's just you have
can't
a
lose
crazy
it.
yard.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just a
Yeah.
huge.
It's good for repelling and like that. Yeah.
And then it's like, since Broad Street is not improved and we don't know who owns it, why couldn't somebody build a house on Broad Street?
I think though that, because that was a long time ago, that meeting, I think that they subsequently got information about Broad Street
Well,
being
the
a map
applicant said that
street.
in the statement, but I don't think they ever, I never saw a letter from city planning saying that it is a corner lot.
Okay.
I think as far as, I think, I agree with you, I think the houses are too narrow for an R2, and I didn't see why they couldn't try for 2 semi-detached homes. In the financials, they're missing, they don't count the basement floor area in both the as-of-right and proposed scenarios. The as-of-right is extremely underbuilt. They could make a much larger home. What else? When you go to the site, they actually advertise as a future site of luxury condos. 4 bedrooms, plus garage, plus studio apartment.
Yes.
So they're intending to make these 2 families,
Yeah.
because they're going to put an apartment in the basement.
Yeah.
And
The layout.
There's a big sign
Yeah.
out that says
Clearly.
that.
so that, I was wondering about that, and I just think that regarding the financials, that since most of the site is unusable, the site value is too high. And what else? You can't have parking in R2 districts in your front yard, so that would be another waiver.
Well, actually, not that he was in favor of the project, but Borough President Otto suggested not having parking on the site at all to avoid the curb cuts, right? I don't know that that's a good solution in a place where everyone has a car. Okay. In terms of what you saw on the, it was advertised luxury condos with what mix?
With 4 bedrooms, plus garage, plus a studio apartment.
Right, that makes
So
each
that
unit
can't
two
be
bedroom.
what we just saw, because those tiny, tiny houses don't have 4 bedrooms.
Okay,
Right.
maybe it's a different project, you're saying.
So they need to explain that.
Well, speaking about the bedroom in the proposed one, I'm looking at the second floor plan of the proposed, and there are 3 bedrooms, and there's 1 bedroom that's in the middle without any light, any legal windows. I would like to know how that would be permitted.
It has a
And would we-
skylight.
It has a skylight.
Is skylight
Skylights are
permitted?
allowed.
Yeah, you're permitted to have the skylight.
It's a misery, but
Yeah,
yeah,
you
considered
can have the
ventilation, light and ventilation,
Yeah.
you just no view. View is not one of the requirements to protect health,
Right. Light, just think light.
just light and air.
With the snow on?
I know. Sad,
It is
but
what it is.
nonetheless.
What can I
You
say?
put a mirror so you can see the sky.
Different angles.
Right. Okay, so does anybody have any other comments for that? I'll read Commissioner Otley Brown's about the finances. Anybody else? Okay. So, again, she thinks they did make the A finding. I'm just going to read this because it's complicated. So, the site value is based on R1, R2, and R3 sales. The average price is $42 to $53 a square foot. The, let's say the averages are 42 to 53 square foot, and they're taking for the study the average of $46 a square foot. The lot size is 7,377 square feet. However, they are only using 6,537 square feet, and she likes to understand why. Also, you can get an extra 0.1 under a slope, 0.1 FAR. Yeah, under a slope, so in 10%. So why not use 0.6 FAR for the buildable, I'm sorry, those are buildable areas, which is 8,865 square feet. So in other words, the buildable estimates are being underestimated in the first place, and you're not taking advantage
That's not
of...
an R2.
But not in an R2?
I
Doesn't
don't
apply?
believe so. Under a slope.
Okay, so the applicant needs to check whether the slope bonus
bonus.
effectively
Yeah, it's
applies
an
in this district.
Not an R2.
When she redoes the math, yeah, she gets obviously a larger land value, higher land value. The adjustments to the land sales don't make sense, and so the site value may actually be overvalued. So with respect to the comps. Comps 1 and 2, she asked, why are you adding to the value per square foot for utilities and for utility and size when this is a rectangular site that is smaller and level and easier to develop than the subject? Those referring to the comps. Smaller land is more expensive per square foot, especially in this case where there is clearly excess land that can't be developed. In the subject case, there's excess land that can't be developed. Level land is more expensive than hilly land. Therefore, there should be negative adjustments on the flat sites. With respect to Comp 3, you say you don't adjust for zoning because the uses are the same, yet you adjust downward for zoning in the matrix. With respect to Comp 4, you say the site is comparable in size to the subject, so you don't adjust down in size, yet you do adjust downward for size in the matrix. So the explanations in the matrix are not consistent with each other. With respect to the as-of-right single-family home prices, at $242 a square foot, and the seller is $121 a square foot, the description of the adjustments do not reflect their comparability to the subject. The sales price doesn't take into account the excess land. No adjustments for the fact that the subject has a lot more land even if you can't develop it. There are no other homes right on top of this, which is preferable. So it means that you're in this kind of private area, at least to your above you, as opposed to the side of you. Even though that Broad Street being undeveloped and not being yours also makes that like a private buffer. Also, Comp 3 is adjusted upwards because it is a, quote, substantially smaller building, but in fact it's the same size building as the proposed. Also, the utility adjustment means different things for each comparable, and it isn't clear what it is. For example, Comps 1 and 2 are adjusted up for utility because they are smaller than the subject lot, and Comps 3 and 4 are not adjusted at all for utility, and they are also smaller than the subject lot. So, so there's an inconsistency. The proposed single-family townhome prices of $249 a square foot, however, the seller is $124 a square foot. The adjustments don't. Oops, did I just read that? I think I just read that. No, sorry. That's the proposed, right, sorry. So it's still $249 for the townhome prices and $124 for the seller, but the adjustments there also don't make sense, and the sales prices don't take into account the excess land. Comp 1, there is no adjustment for size, even though this is a much smaller home on a much smaller lot. However, there is an adjustment for utility since the home is narrow at 12 feet wide. Comp 4, no adjustment for size was made, even though this is also a slightly smaller home on a smaller, narrower lot. And no adjustment for utility was made, even though this home is also very narrow, judging by the photograph. The other two comps are also smaller with less land, but no adjustment was provided for size for them either. Each home there sells for $472,000 for a total of $1.4 million. The as-of-right construction costs, the breakdown says $566,000 for cost, including profit and overhead, but doesn't state how much profit and how much overhead. It seems to be built into the line item, so it is hard to tell if it is excessive. That's usually pulled out at the very bottom, profit and overhead. Also, there isn't any isolation of costs that relate directly to the hardship, like grading, excavation, retaining wall building, etc. So those premium costs always need to be isolated so we can understand what the impact is on the project and what the hardship is specifically. With respect to the proposed construction costs, the breakdown says $877,000 for cost, including profit and overhead, but again, it doesn't explain what the profit and overhead is. Also built into the line items, so hard to tell. And again, there's no isolation of costs directly related to the grading, excavation, retaining wall, etc. And it is hard to tell which line items are expensive simply because the proposed scenario is larger than the as-of-right. So obviously, the financial study needs a lot of work. So yeah. Anybody, anything left on this? Sorry, that was.
I just wanted to note that there are city planning approvals that are going to be needed as well. And in fact, I think they wanted to have the waiver for the front yards be done at city planning rather than here, and they're amending their application to that effect. And then we are going to, we wanted to have the hearing, listen to what the board members' sort of thoughts were on this, and then we want to do a meeting with city planning, the applicant, and BSA staff, so that we can shape the proposal not by having them come here, go there, come here, go there, but hear what everyone has to say, then go and shape the proposal, and then sort of move forward.
Would they go through the city planning process first before we would?
No, we have to act. City planning won't approve things that are not complying with zoning, whereas we can make our, if we were to grant this, we could make it conditional on them getting their city planning approvals so that they're.
That's what's sort of confusing. This whole thing could be done at city planning, where they don't have to go back and forth. They could get a use waiver at city planning. It's a special permit, and the others are authorizations, but I mean, they could travel together if you want an agency reviewing the whole thing. I mean, the variance findings are completely different kind of findings, right? Mm-hmm. We have to talk about reasonable return on investment and all of that. We have to say we don't believe that the configuration of the buildings is the best for the greatest return and so on. City planning doesn't look at those kinds of issues. So we are ultimately, based on comments, potentially reconfiguring the buildings. Their proposal, before us anyway, is 3 single-family homes, right, and attached, and it may turn out to be 2 family homes, right, attached homes, simply because of our financial analysis, which may not be what the developer prefers, and may be something that city planning, because they have different findings, would find acceptable. So I actually don't understand why they're choosing, since they do have to go through public review in some form, even if it isn't like a full ULURP, in some form. I actually don't get it. So, okay. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Lori. Okay, next.
Item number 2, 2016-3BZ, 1212 Victory Boulevard, Staten Island.
Unfortunately, this one has to be postponed for failure to give proper notice to public and I guess other agencies.
Item number 3, 2016-4136BZ through 2016-4137BZ. This is 19-59, 61, and 1955, 1957 49th Street, Queens.
The community board responded on condition with a whole list of conditions that I won't read unless anyone asks me to, because the other commissioners have that information, but we can read it in the hearing tomorrow if necessary. I'd like the applicant to respond to all of those questions. I didn't understand this statement in the statement of facts that a C of O wasn't obtained for the houses of worship because it's two separate buildings, which is such a confusing project in the first place, because, quote, a parking waiver is required. I don't understand that. Maybe it's mixing tenses or something. A parking waiver is being asked for today, but that doesn't have anything to do with houses of worship before. It seems to me, though, that the buildings were never actually occupied. That's why they didn't get a C of O, because of all these problems with sewer mains and so on. And I did understand that the buildings as built provided the required parking for the uses for which they were intended. So that's just a strange statement in the statement of facts. There's a claim that there are 374 open street parking spaces. That's kind of surprising, but anyway, that needs to be substantiated by other current and build year construction projects that would add on-street parking needs to the area. The zoning analysis sheet needs a correction as it shows no waivers needed and that use group 4 is not permitted, so that zoning analysis sheet is completely wrong. I'd like to know why the circulation space at the first floor isn't counted as floor area. That was quite strange. It's on the level of the parking, but it takes you to the upper level, so it's counted as floor area. And since the parking demand study shows the demand is actually exceeding what is required in parking as valet, and then I'll get into my confusion about this, I'd like to know why stackers aren't provided. There are 13-foot high floor to ceiling. There's a 13-foot high floor to ceiling, so a double stacker can fit. I looked up the specs on a double stacker, it can definitely fit. And there is limited public transit to the site, so the modal split actually is probably higher than that shown on the proposed. I'd like to know what the area was used, which area DOT used in its study to determine the modal split, and what is its proximity to public transit. Also, we need a maneuverability diagram, including stacker installation. I'd like to understand what the reason for the declaration that restricts the use of the property to a house of worship is and how that can be altered. The applicant didn't talk about that. And whether DOB has consented to the change. I figured out that the reason for the declaration, which the applicant doesn't mention, is of course this is a 2.4 FAR building in an M11. So it's not allowed to be a 2.4 FAR building unless occupied by a community facility. So DOB would have to consent to the use change, and the restriction would be on community facility as an ambulatory care facility. But these are kind of like, you don't know why, and the applicant doesn't bother to tell you, so now you have to try to figure out how to guess what the answer is, and it's really a waste of time. They need to label and provide the sources for the backup materials provided in the traffic analysis, the parking analysis, and verify that all backup material has been provided for all assumptions made on modal splits, temporal distribution and trip generation, and parking accumulation for the use. They need to explain the temporal distribution numbers and show the calculations, because for the life of me I could not get to the numbers when I tried to do the calculations myself. They didn't equal the numbers on the chart. And I'd like to know, why doesn't the travel demand person trips, or why don't the travel demand person trips and the vehicle trips match if both are split into the same types of transport? They're two charts and they have different numbers for the exact same splits. And I don't see how the backup data supports the assumptions shown on the charts. For example, the chart daily trip generation of 127 per 1,000 gross square feet, which we see used often in these applications, has a backup of a daily trip generation that breaks it up into staff and patients of 10 per 1,000 square feet and 33.6 per seat. And I don't know what the seat is. Seats of waiting room? Seats of, what kind of seats? Plus, in the backup study, there are available subways, so it's completely unrelated neighborhood. There's no subways near this site. Also, if the census tract indicates, and they provided census tract data, right? If it indicates that out of the 5,000 people surveyed, only 7% of them use buses or to get to work, why would then, in this case, the modal split be 34% for bus use? That can't be, makes no sense. I'm also very confused, if I didn't indicate it already, by the parking study. The statement of fact states that a total of 78 spaces is required during peak hours for the two buildings combined, or 34 spaces at each building with a shortfall of 42 spaces. I'm guessing there was another parking study before there was this parking study.
There was.
Right?
There was one that was based on the seeker manual.
Yeah. Okay.
With separate rates for staff and for patrons. And then I think they used the revised DOT, which is not published, but everybody's using it. So it just shows the discrepancy between those two modes of analysis. One shows 78 spaces shortfall, the other one shows 4.
Right.
Huge
So,
discrepancy.
let's just say, when you make a submission, and then you void it, because that was in the void folder, right? And then you void it, it doesn't mean that the study hasn't been done, and you have to justify why you are now varying so extremely, especially when there's virtually no public transportation to the site. I looked at those bus routes. They're very specific. They'd actually be more useful for me than people who live around the neighborhood, because one of them is an express bus that goes into Manhattan. So, yeah, so let's just say we question extremely the parking analysis, and because the site can handle stackers, I don't see why the site doesn't put in stackers. Also, there's a lot of mistakes in the parking study in addition to all of that. The statement of fact states that the data in the parking study is based on the Flushing Commons EIS, while the study has the study itself has a footnote that states it's based on the East New York EIS. But meanwhile, some of the backup data, most of which isn't labeled, refers to the Flushing Commons EIS.
And none of those neighborhoods, I think, correspond to this neighborhood. Flushing Commons, definitely not, which is so well served by transit. It is like the third largest transit hub. This is nowhere close to being that. And East New York also has a very different transit modal split. I'm not sure why they did not pick some of the recent development that is happening in Astoria that went through FEIS, the one in the NYC housing complex, which is far away from transit and has, dependent on 1 or 2 bus routes, and that should be studied. There have been 2 individual projects which had EISs, and those should be used.
Do you know what the other one was?
Both are in that Astoria Cove area. One was in the NYCHA property, and then there is another private one that is to the north of it. I can look at the map and I can tell you, I can visualize it, but I don't know the name of the project. But those were 2 projects recently done, I would say 3 or 4 years ago. I think that neighborhood is much more corresponding in terms of the modal split.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. And then I just also add the parking study is very old, and the space counts are from October of 2015. So we noticed often that there are a lot of developments that occur that could affect the parking study, new construction and so on. That has to, and changes in parking patterns perhaps. They need to provide maps for the parking space study, which they also didn't do. They provided a parking regulations map, which is very hard to understand since it indicates that the entirety of Hazen Street, for instance, is a no standing zone. That's just because it's sort of a lazy map. It just sort of throws a number. to indicate what the parking regulations are. Most of the time we see, and those are the good maps, that show very clearly using a color along the curb line what the extent of the various parking regulations are, and then at those places where there is a parking regulation, it'll indicate that, say, that'll say 0 spaces, legal spaces, 0 spaces available, or maybe on Tuesday and Thursday, those spaces are legal, but then the study has to be done on the days when it's not legal, right? So we get an understanding of, in the worst case scenario, when the parking would be available at peak times. I'll just read Commissioner Otley Brown's comments, which again are about the parking studies. She asks, where is the street map showing the parking regulations to see if they're accounting availability appropriately? There is one map with the regulations key, but it is confusing. There is a number 16 listed on the table, which is an alternate side Tuesday regulation, which affects this report, which was conducted on a Tuesday, but she can't see where on the map that area, that 16 is located. And you also can't see the number of actual spaces per block. This is standard on parking studies. Anybody else? Any other information? Any other comments?
No, I think
No?
that was pretty thorough.
Okay. Okay.
Item number 4, 2016-4183 BZ, 432, 438 East 14th Street, Manhattan.
Okay, I have a ton of comments on this, so maybe I'll break it up or something, but so first I note that Community Board 3, Community Board 3 unanimously opposed this application on the basis of its scale, the requested waivers, and questions about whether the as-of-right can be viable. We also have many letters of opposition, many of which, but not all, are from area residents. There was sort of a blast done by one community group, and sometimes the residents live on like 72nd Street. So, but I noted that most of them are from neighbors. There's a report from user Rutledge that states that the project is 13 stories plus a cellar. One, in fact, it's only 12, but I think they picked that up in other places. It's just internally inconsistent. I ask, and we'll have a lot of those questions, isn't only 20% of the site affected by the old stream bed, which is also where it formed filled in? So then why then isn't this site more similar to others in the areas that don't have streams running under them if the stream is filled in and it's only 20%? I just didn't really see how the stream plays into this A finding. The applicant claims that 421 East 13th and 420 East 14th that are adjacent to the site and were constructed in 2006 without variances, maybe without substantiation, acting as a dam that distributes more water on the site. I'll let Commissioner Montanez pick up on that. I'd like to know, wouldn't that be the case with every site with foundations that go below the groundwater level? And I'd like to know what was the groundwater level at that site. That site is supported in part on mat slab foundation, as is proposed here, so they had expensive construction costs. I'd like to know, why can't the underpinning be done against the new building rather than a C-can? If the new building has real foundations, why wouldn't you use underpinning? I know that more and more, because of issues of getting permission from the neighbor to underpin, property owners are going for C-can because you can't get approval to underpin. So I'm not always sure that the choice of C-can or using curb foundations isn't a choice to facilitate the development, as opposed to necessity because of some concern about undermining the foundations. And especially in the case of the new building, it's certainly a more stable structure than adjacent tenements, which are like the standard neighbor on like a huge number of projects in New York, so that's not necessarily an unusual condition, in fact, or unique condition. And then I asked, there's a row of taxpayers, so a small site that has a bunch of taxpayers. It seems to me that site would be similarly situated to this site, so then also entitled, according to the argument, to a variance with an A finding. And then there's, of course, the project at 524 East 14th Street that's currently going on, also at 500 East 14th Street without variances. Why are those able to proceed without variances? The argument that there's an argument that other sites on similar subterranean conditions are already developed with tenements that have shallow cellars. But if, as stated in the Muser-Rutledge report, most tenements have full 7 to 8 foot floor-to-ceiling cellars, even if they are only used for boilers and storage, doesn't that support a cellar of similar depth at the 13th Street side of the building where there isn't a proposal for commercial? And the commercial being so important to the development, then I'm not sure why the 13th Street side is at a disadvantage at all. And that's sort of demonstrated by the fact that there are those two buildings under construction at 500 and 524 East 14th Street that didn't receive variances and removed lots of tenement buildings and are adjacent to tenement buildings. Also, the 1934 Sanborn map shows that the site was developed with neighborhood typical structures, including tenements, until some of these were removed to accommodate an amusement facility. That was the actual intention of the demolition, and that was described in the BSA resolution when the site received a variance for parking because the I think that the zoning resolution prohibited an amusement park, so therefore now they had to have a parking lot. And then there was a post office installed, so you could argue that unlike all those sites that were last developed in the late 19th century, this site has seen more movement and development, hence more investment, than most of the other sites in the area. So I don't see how you can look at this site as somehow beleaguered by the fact that it isn't built to the height of the tenement buildings. Those tenement building owners were probably envious at the time when the post office was built that site is improved by a paying federal facility with a brand new building. So I don't really buy that argument. The drawings indicate waivers are being sought for floor area, density, dormers, height and setback, and something to do with quality housing and bicycle parking. That isn't consistent at all with the objection sheet or with the statement of facts. That needs to be clarified. The zoning calculation sheet should show both what is required and what is proposed at each zoning resolution section. And I'd like to know why the 7th floor at 14th Street on the proposed is shown as being entirely non-compliant. That's on the proposed, when it is shown as conforming on the as-of-right.
Two floors actually should just show the setback. It's not compliant, not the whole floor.
Not the whole floor. That's, I think it's a mistake like that.
It's a big mistake.
Yeah, it's a big mistake. It confuses us. In the as-of-right, why does the cellar on the 13th Street building need to be have 12-foot ceilings if the uses are mechanical and tenant amenity spaces? So there's no justification at all for a deep cellar on 13th Street. With respect to the reasoning for the 12-foot ceilings on the 14th Street side, an argument is being made that it is needed to offset the losses from the affordable component of the project. That seems to me to be a self-created hardship. If the building were entirely market rate and the cellar were provided, would it need this waiver at all? I'm sorry to say that about provisional of affordable housing, but that's the variance process. And if you choose to market to below market, then you can't say you're creating, that the hardship is integral to the site when it's integral to your financing decisions, basically, or your underwriting decisions. With respect to the scope of the requested waiver in light of the hardship, normally, let's just say we ignore the self-created aspect of the affordability and we look at what the scope of the waiver should be. Normally, that would just translate into an extra floor to allow the building to forego the cellar construction, and that would be all. I don't see how that translates into one FAR, especially in light of the 4.6 FAR max in the inclusionary housing designated area that's across 13th Street on Avenue A. And consistent with this thinking, also, the minimum variance would be an 8-story building on 14th Street with 2 levels of commercial above grade, since commercial is what we need. But I don't see how any waiver is needed for the 13th Street side, since the uses there are not what is being described as driving the costs, and the cellar can be shallow. Also, I think it's misleading which we see throughout the application in different places. I think it's misleading to look at the FAR of the site as a standalone and not the entire zoning lot, which includes the little TDR site adjacent, even though because you do the math with the TDR site, even though the terms of the zoning lot agreement is a limitation on the amount of floor area there. So you're not getting all the excess floor area necessarily from that site, but it's still part of the zoning lot. You have to look at it in terms of the entire zoning lot. That's the floor area ratio. With respect to neighborhood character, with respect to neighborhood character, I disagree to the extreme that the context of the neighborhood includes the towers of Stuyvesant Town. That is a distinctly developed tower in the Park neighborhood to the north that sits wholly and entirely apart from the area to the south of 14th Street, which is characterized by densely built tenement buildings with high floor-to-floor heights, but generally not higher than 6 stories. The diagram provided showing a 121-foot high structure just to the west of the site, which is the new building, I think, must be an error or referring to a bulkhead, as the maximum height of that building is 80 feet, and nothing appears to come close to that height. So I think it might be, I don't know how it could be the bulkhead either, because it's not a 40-foot high bulkhead. It also isn't appropriate to use church steeples or turn of the 20th century school structures as a comparison for an apartment building. These are civic and religious institutions with a different typology, often specifically designed to stand out in a neighborhood, to draw the public to them. They're public buildings. However, I do agree, even though it's not up to me on this, that 14th Street as a wide street should have been zoned to allow taller street wall buildings, but it wasn't, so there we are. And finally, and most importantly, with respect to the A finding, where I really meant to stay, they need to explain why a permit was obtained for the as-of-right building in 2015 if the as-of-right project isn't feasible, and why, if groundwater levels at 8 feet were known in advance, the project proceeded. We have a map that shows that it's common knowledge that the groundwater levels are at 8 feet, so you didn't need to do borings in order to find that out. And further to that, and again, most importantly, construction has already started. A letter from the applicant dated, I think, Friday, 1/2017, advises us, and I'm sort of upset that the applicant didn't volunteer this information, advises us that support of excavation and soil disposal, dewatering system, rat slab installation are all in place, and that waterproofing, mat slab, rebar installation, and underground plumbing is also in place. A variance presumes that a project is not feasible without the requested relief. Here the argument is that the subterranean conditions prevent construction of deep cellars that are essential to the success of the commercial building, since they result in premium costs that make the project infeasible. If it isn't feasible, then why has the owner already completed the work that is the source of the hardship and the premium? If it's such a hardship, you wouldn't do it without a variance. So I don't see any reason anymore to consider a variance, as the developer has decided to proceed with the project in spite of the risk that he has an infeasible project. No bank would loan on an infeasible project, so underwriting of the as-of-right project must have demonstrated feasibility. In our comments today, we would have directed, and you heard some of my comments, changes be made to the project to make it a less costly project and the premiums less onerous. Now that the cellar has been completely excavated, the slab in place, all of that, we can no longer do that. So there is a 12-foot high ceiling in the cellar now. And then I have a lot of comments on the financials and Commissioner Otley Brown's as well, but I'd like to go to the A and other findings before we go to the financials. So
I guess my biggest question was concerning the current permit and build. And although it's understood in the industry perhaps that because city process can take a while, or being a BSA or being city planning can take a while, you might start on an as-of-right building. However, typically you would start on areas in which perhaps are not covered by a potential variance, or are easy to accomplish just to get yourself sort of a head start. But it would appear that so much being done that is affected by what decisions would be made here seems to me a little strange. And I think I sort of stopped and went, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on? So I would like to hear an explanation, definitely, as to why they would even want to proceed here if indeed they could build without any hindrance or financial concern. So yeah, that was my biggest issue. Everything else I think you covered, but it was a little strange.
Yes. Okay, so looking at I may be repeating things that were already said, but regarding the Muser-Rutledge report, I do think the report and the borings confirm the existence of poor soil conditions, in particular the compressible organic sediments in the northwest portion of the site. And they line up with the swampy area on the Veely map. And these particular soils don't occur in the remainder of the site. So that's about 20% of the site. The Veely map shows streams and marshland covering significant portions of land in this area. Several blocks indicate similar historical conditions comparable to the site. So I question whether these hardship conditions are unique. Regarding groundwater, the Muser-Rutledge study of buildings within 400 feet indicates most have shallow to no cellars, which indicates to me that high groundwater is not unique, but is a general condition in the area. For their typical groundwater elevation, they're using a USGS data map, which is just a very gross data source. And they have added their own data, which shows that in a lot of other locations, the Muser-Rutledge groundwater data does not match the USGS data. So I believe they really need to provide additional evidence of typical groundwater conditions in the area. The USGS map is not sufficient. Regarding groundwater conditions on the site, they provided 2 months of readings in April and May of 2015. These could have been seasonal readings in the spring. We don't know if there's seasonal variations present in the groundwater, and I believe we should have additional groundwater readings throughout other parts of the year. The driving factor for the hardship is the decision to provide retail in the cellar, proposing 15 foot 8 inches from the top of the cellar slab to grade. They argue that cellar retail is necessary to make the project feasible. and that cellar retail space requires a greater floor height. However, that doesn't explain why they have the same cellar height in the residential portion on East 13th Street. And since they've already started construction, it precludes our ability to discuss alternatives to this deep excavation. You know, such as the chair said, maybe having 2 floors of above-grade commercial space. So why have they already done this construction? Again, you know, it wouldn't possibly not require the secant pile wall. They could have a shallower floor slab. And the adjacent building at 421 East 13th Street did not have this robust foundation system, and the cellar floor slab presumably was higher. And it appears to me that this site would have been more significantly impacted by the swampy old stream bed, because more of it was going through the center of the site.
The adjacent site.
The adjacent site, right. And regarding the stream bed and the damming of the water, making the groundwater at this location higher, from looking at the stream bed map and from realizing that usually water runs towards the river, I would have thought that that site might have actually reduced the groundwater elevations, because the water, to me, presumably was going from west to east. But, you know, maybe they can elaborate on that. They didn't really give us any details for the hardships, no unit parameters, unit costs in terms of how deep are the secant piles. If it's a cut-off wall, why do you still have to do dewatering? Since the work is already done, they can give us the actual costs, because it was done between, I assume, July and December of this past year, which is pretty quick.
When they pulled the permit.
Right. In terms of an as-of-right comparison to the hardship scenario, I would follow whatever was done at the adjacent site. If the adjacent site used drilled micropiles, then I think this site should have drilled micropiles and a shallower foundation. I don't think that, you know, just assuming that there's going to be no groundwater is a typical as-of-right scenario in this location. So I don't agree with what the cost comparison is in terms of calculating the hardship. And just in terms of the neighborhood character, I just feel the frontage on 14th Street appears massive, that there is a definite setback following the line of buildings along 14th Street. And then, yeah, I have the same comment about on floors 7 and 8, the only area not in compliance is the setback area. So that's most of my comments.
Oh, and just to add to that, now we have, we know that there's buildings under construction down the street, so that data should be available too in terms of what kind of structural concerns they face, right? So. Okay.
So I think most of the concerns, all of you have, my concerns you've all raised. I would add a few things, which is more related to the zoning. It was not clear from the analysis, zoning analysis, or from the diagrams, if maximization of floor area in the as-of-right or in the typical development was used. And what I mean by that is the use of the dormer rule in the as-of-right and in the typical development. That would have, it's a permitted obstruction above the maximum base street wall, and it would allow for more floor area, and that could be used both on 13th Street and on 14th Street. I understand that on 13th Street there isn't any waiver that is being sought. All the waiver is on the 14th Street, but dormer rule could be used on both sides to maximize the floor area, both in the as-of-right and typical. And also from that, build on the proposed. The other one was the difference in the cellar between the existing and the proposed. The statement of facts said that there is a difference in the cellar between the existing and proposed, which was not clear for me. To me, it was the same cellar that is being proposed, at least diagrammatically. So I would just like some clarification.
Say that again? I don't understand.
The statement of fact, somewhere in the, I do not know, I don't have the page number in front of me, but as I was reading it, it said the as of right has a different cellar and the proposed has a deeper cellar.
But that's not the way they constructed it.
That's not the way it's constructed, and the as of right drawing shows the same cellar depth as the proposed. It's only the typical one that does not have a cellar.
Yes, correct.
So I would, it should be clarified in the statement of fact. I also had a question with regards to the floor-to-floor height. I noticed that the floor-to-floor height on the 13th Street portion of the building varies from the floor-to-floor height on the 14th Street. It's though by few inches. The 13th Street floor-to-floor height is 9'6". On the 14th Street, it's I think 10 or 9, something like that. Would reducing that height, would that also bring down the cost of construction, and would that avail an additional floor? It's a question I have, and maybe they can elaborate on that. I think all of you have stated the concern I have is, given that construction is happening on an as-of-right basis, a bank would underwrite this loan, and I think we should try to understand what was underwritten and use that as the as-of-right cost, and from that work off on the proposed and the typical. Because I don't think the bank would lend money if it knows it's going to not generate revenue.
And it wouldn't lend money based on a potential variance that's an unreliable unknown, right?
Now, I had a lot of questions on the things that relate to finance. Should I raise it now, or should I wait for? My question was it's not clear what use group is going to be proposed, but it's very likely that a food facility, a produce facility could be located there. And if it is, it would be eligible for fresh tax incentive. And has that been analyzed? And that should be considered. I have similar question with regards to the affordable units that are being proposed. How is that going to be financed? What kind of affordable program is going to be considered, and what will be the duration of the affordability, and what will be the income tiers that is being targeted, both in the as-of-right and the proposed.
But it did say it would be, I forget if it's 60% of AMI because it's a 421A project.
We don't know 421A.
And 421A, we don't know what the parameters
Right, so what is the
are.
alternative? How do we ensure there will be affordability? That's what I'm leading to.
Because there is no current 421A program, staff does not recommend that you sort of imagine one.
Right.
Yeah, so.
But their financials are completely reliant on the 421A.
Right.
But I thought they already had approval for that.
I
thought they did.
I don't know.
That may have been the driver behind their breaking ground, if they tried to do that. But I would appreciate an that wasn't explained. Okay.
Right.
At least there's no documents indicating that, so we definitely need a clarification how the affordability is, the units are going to be made affordable, and to duration of this affordability. I'm losing my chain of thought. I'll come back. There's another question I had in mind.
Okay, I just want to say that, the variances based on affordable housing are very difficult for us because if we're giving zoning waivers for affordability, that's a permanent zoning waiver. When the affordability goes away and you switch into market rate units, then there was no need for the waiver in the first place, right? So that's really tricky when we have applications where, let's say, the unit mix is critical to the analysis, where we say these are 3-bedroom units, they'll sell for this much money. You can't go away and then come back mid, let's say, construction, or let's say design development process, and say, we realize that actually 2-bedroom units are better, and we want by letter of substantial compliance to change everything to 2-bedroom units, because, for example, the entire variance was hinged on the 3-bedroom units. In the same way here, we would need to have something that restricts those units in permanence to affordability, which is not how, say, the 421A program works. It's 20 years or 15 years, or whatever it turns out to be when they finally do it, right? And DOB, who's the only agency that reviews applications that are BSA applications, doesn't review what the rental rates are. So we have no way of enforcing this, of knowing that the building is maintained with the 20% affordability.
Unless they get folded into rent stabilized units and go into the DHCR account and other things. But that, again, is a monitoring issue, and how one does that is a question I would like to understand based on past BSA applications. I did have one question, which was going back to the fact, the uniqueness of the site. The groundwater condition is affecting 20% of the site. What I would like to know is, why was the construction of a deep foundation and the CCAM construction type utilized for the entirety of the site, especially on the 13th Street, which has the biggest front, I think does it have the widest
No, the groundwater condition is a condition on the entire site. The soft soils with the marsh were in the northwest.
Okay, so it makes sense to...
According to their 3 groundwater wells, which were around the site, they all showed the same level.
Consistent that warrant.
But I don't agree that, I thought that we just done for 2 months, not for an entire year. They didn't give us enough readings, and then they're using the USGS map data as what the typical should be, which is a very gross map.
Okay.
You know, it's not meant to analyze, you know, what's typical in this area.
Right.
So I don't believe that gives us, you know, a bar to measure what's typical.
Right. Okay. But in addition to which, the groundwater map that, what's it called, the Miley map?
The Veely map is the historic.
The historic map,
yes.
That shows 8-foot groundwater on this site, so you didn't need to do boring. So in advance, it's not like, you know, sometimes what happens is a project starts construction, and they do now, because now they took away the post office, then they do the actual borings, right? Then they find out, oh my God, look, the groundwater is really high. But that's not the case. That's not what they're claiming here. They're claiming groundwater levels the same as what's shown on that wide area map. So they didn't encounter an unexpected, there wasn't anything unexpected. The historic map shows the stream bed, it shows the water table. Everyone knows in this area that the water table is very high.
You just have to remember that in the past, datums were very different. And you could be talking about Manhattan datum, a datum from a long time ago. You could be talking about a 1929 datum or a 1988 datum, so elevations are not uniform.
But that map is showing 8 feet, right? It's showing 8 feet. They're saying it's at 8 feet. So what did we learn that's different?
I don't know. I'd have to look at that again. I didn't notice that in terms of 8 feet on the Veely map.
I think that's the map. Yeah, there's one map that shows an area of all of Lower Manhattan, 14th and South.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, okay.
Sorry. So I had to also comment on the neighborhood character. I agree with you. The statement that says that there is no dominant build form and the architectural diversity, it is very uniform. And 14th Street acts as a very, as a divide between what's a super block, Star in a Park complex versus tenement housing on the other side. And I think the neighborhood character should reflect that and not treat the north side of 14th Street as a context to pick up on.
Right, unless this was a tower in the park.
Unless this
proposal.
was, right.
But you need a park with towers in it to start with, so we
And
don't have that.
even within Stuytown, the development is very uniform. You have towers kind of set in the back, wrapped by these lower base, lower tall base, and they're very uniformly set. So there is a break of space and structure and form, whereas here the same pattern is there on the southern side, which has a uniform street wall, and then there is a setback. And I think this one sheer wall rising up, it's definitely not in the context of any of the character in terms of the patterns that one sees on either side.
Okay, now I'll get to the financial. Everybody else? Okay. So some of my comments and the rest are Commissioner Otley Brown's. Just found there are errors in the summary sheet in terms of zoning floor area. So according to the floor plans, there are 124,258 zoning square feet, not 123,658 zoning square feet. The summary says there's a waiver for commercial use being sought, which is not the case. The as-of-right alternative has an 8-story building on 13th and not 14th, and a 7-story building on 14th and not 13th. And that fact is not internally consistent even within the summary itself. So that's called proofreading and checking against the data that you're using to prepare the report. The TDRs were valued at the same rate as land value and blended together. I don't know whether that's the TDR market for this area. I seriously doubt it. The retail comps for 210 and 212 East 14th Street are located in 2 tiny 19th century buildings. Those are not comps for the superior retail space to be offered in this project. 20 Avenue A on East 2nd Street is also not comparable. A Union Square building was used for the apartment rental comps. Comps should look as far as Union Square and buildings of similar type. With respect to the apartment comps, no chart was provided to show how adjustments were made for apartments of similar sizes in the same or similar lines. No chart was provided to show that the average of all rents for a given unit type is equal to the average rents established by the comps. That needs to be provided. They need to correct the errors in the charts where units were assigned rates not consistent with unit type or sizes. For instance, there are 0-bedroom rents shown as with 1-bedroom values. They need to correct the errors in the charts that don't include outdoor space for some of the apartments. They need to provide justification for the value of the outdoor space, which is not provided anywhere. Only one of the comps actually has outdoor space, and this fact is not mentioned in the analysis. Commissioner Otley Brown's comments are, this is in total, right? Her overall thoughts are that this project, that the hardship is self-created, and so it won't meet the D finding. The applicant wants to provide affordable housing, which isn't required, and so they want to build a deep cellar to provide prime retail cellar space so they can offset the cost of providing affordable housing. However, that drives the construction costs upwards considerably, which makes the project infeasible unless there is an increase in FAR. This request is also not in line with current policy regarding affordable housing, which allows the BSA to waive the affordable housing requirements for projects where the developer can prove financial hardship in complying. So that's true. So it's kind of, if affordable housing where it's imposed on you in those designated areas can be waived, then if it's posing a hardship where it doesn't need to be waived, why then pursue it? So she says to be in line with existing policy, the simple answer is remove the affordable housing from the project. With respect to the A finding, the adjacent condominium building was built with a hybrid foundation of micropiles on 14th, probably adjacent to the streambred, and a mat foundation on the 13th Street side. Can't that be done at this site, and would it be cheaper? Has a solution been provided? Has a solution of providing the extra retail on the second floor instead of cellar been explored? And would it be feasible? These are questions we've asked before, no longer an option because the excavation is complete, unless we ask them to fill it up again and take credit. With respect to character, this should not be compared to Stuyvesant's Town simply because the height is similar. Town is very different because it has lots of open space to offset its density and height. And then the balance is her financial analysis. The apartment breakdown for the proposed scenario needs to be reconciled between page 5 and pages 34 and 36. So this is always internal consistency issues. With respect to the site value, valued as vacant land with a 4 FAR for lot 23 and air rights in the amount of 3,970 square feet for lot 32. The comparables are old, 2 from 2013 with a 10% upward adjustment for time, and 3 are from 2015 with no adjustment for time, which, however, that, let's see, and are varied from zoning. So they are also varied from zoning with no zoning adjustments. The FAR differentials are taken care of by dividing by available building area. All lot sizes are much smaller with a positive 10% adjustment to price for size, which she questions. Usually larger lots are cheaper than smaller lots, so there should be a downward adjustment for size instead. It should be adjusted downward by 10%, which would lead to an average price of $400 buildable square foot. In fact, this is done for the smaller retail comparables versus the subject retail. So it's already showing downward adjustments for size for a different set of comps. She'd like to know, why are the development rights valued the same as the buildable square foot of the actual main lot? Usually they are a discounted price. We have seen half of the buildable sales price for development rights. So, and doing it this way as the same as buildable raises the site value. So that, related to my question, is what is the TDR market currently? Retail rents are 150 square feet for the first floor and 75 for the cellar. They should use better comparables. Like, as I said, the comparables are all smaller, older, with lower ceiling heights. This is supposed to be prime retail with high ceiling heights on both floors. Also, they should articulate the methodology for discounting the cellar rent. Then, in terms of apartment comparables, only one studio comparable has terrace. No other comps have outdoor space. The methodology needs to be articulated for valuing the apartments. The narrative should discuss the different types of apartments, the different sizes of each type of apartment, the floor location for each apartment, and should articulate a standard that is applied to vary the rents based on type, layout, size, and location within the building. This should validate the rents selected for each apartment in each scenario. Right now, there are inconsistencies in the rents across the same type of apartment. For example, the as-of-right one-bedrooms with no terraces in 2 South are the same price as one-bedrooms in 2 North that have terraces. Also, for example, the as-of-right one-bedroom with no terrace in 2 North is the same price as the one-bedroom with a terrace in 2 North. In each scenario, the entire inventory of each type of market rate apartment, studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, should be averaged to ensure that it hits the average rent cited in the comparables table. That's the goal. You go to the comparables table, tells you the average rent, so when you actually work this out, you should come back and come more or less to that average rent. The outdoor space valuation needs to be articulated with supporting material. Some apartments in the apartment pricing scheme also don't have outdoor space, yet the plans show outdoor space. For example, the as-of-right and proposed 2 South apartment A and the as-of-right and proposed 2 North apartment D. With respect to cap rates, if the analysis is splitting the income and capitalizing each portion, then the equation should be shown that drills down to the NOI for residential and then for retail, so it's possible to follow the work. So we need to see the calculations. Otherwise, it isn't clear how capitalized value was arrived at. That's the end of the comments. Anybody else, last thoughts? Okay. All right, we have a lot of issues with this project.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it?
Thank you, that's it.
Okay, this concludes the public review session for January 23rd, 2017.
Thanks, everybody.